All right, you know what that means. KBO Chats live, coming to you live, of course. Sam Pascal alongside Eric Halterman. About to break down this brand new week of KBO action, welcoming in you guys here on a Monday evening. Barry says hello. Should be a great show here. We got power rankings, little injury note, and of course, talking about the daily lineups, breaking all that down. Vegas analytics coming on in, checking in. Nothing much, Eric. How you've been so far in our KBO landscape now into
Man,
August?
is it really? I thought it was still April. Definitely lost track of time here, but glad we're still doing the show and that you haven't moved on to bigger and better things after your ESPN appearance the other day. I thought that might be the end of things here, but glad to see you're
No,
still
no,
with us.
of course. No, just the beginning here of KBOs. It was great to do that in case you're just tuning in and just finding out now. It was on ESPN Saturday morning, 3:30 a.m. That was definitely a rough staying up that late, but it was very much worth it. Big shout out to Kyle and Tom. Thanks for having me. And Eric, we'll get you on there too. You know more than me, so it should be exciting having the whole RotoWire crew taking over the ESPN broadcast. So that's very cool. So we'll dive right into it here, as this is our live stream, of course. I talked about that on the broadcast. We're breaking down everything, talking about power rankings since we do have the fresh week. Coming out with the number one spot, the NC Dinos. Seems to be Death Taxes and the NC Dinos at number one so far. Kiwoom Heroes at number two and the Deucin Bears at number three. With the Dinos here, Barry is wondering about Aaron Altair. They stay at number one, but they do lose their foreign player to the injured list. How do we see that impacting them here at the number one spot?
Yeah, it's pretty tight at the top. They've been pretty unremarkable lately. I think it's just one win in their last 6 games, and that was with Altair for most or all of that. Altair's injury doesn't seem to necessarily be a major one. Left thumb. They said he left with thumb pain originally, which isn't, the description of a serious injury. We'll see if it ends up being more than that. They obviously have quite a deep lineup. I mean, they gotten by with Altair hitting 8 for much of the year. So it's certainly not a death sentence to their hopes, especially if it's a minor injury, which my guess is that was what it would be. I don't know much more than what we have. But yeah, it's quite close. It's about as close as it's been in a while. Dinos lost a series to the Bears finally for the first time. The Bears finally took 2 out of 3 against them. And the Heroes are charging hard. So those two are not far behind the Dinos' heels at all. I've yet to rank anybody but the Dinos number one, and I think their 4-game lead at the top of the standings keeps them just ahead for now. But with the way the Heroes have been playing since getting Addison Russell back, with the way the Dinos have been struggling of late, I don't see them as a whole lot better than those two by any means.
Yes, looking at the top 3 here, the biggest thing that I notice here is the Heroes getting Addison Russell and kind of making them an offensive team. The Bears have been known to be that offensive juggernaut in the KBO, but now if the Heroes seem to have that in addition to their dominant pitching, Jake Brigham will be back to ace level form. Jokic is doing solid. Do you see them as the next as a true number 2 long term, or do you think this is more still anyone's game and that the Bears very much could dethrone the Dinos before the Heroes do?
I think you can't disrespect the team who's made it to 5 straight Korea series. I don't think you can call the Bears far behind these two. Still serious worries about their pitching staff when they really only have one trustworthy pitcher at the moment with Chris Flexen still out. So I'd still have them number 3. I think the Heroes are closer to jumping up to 1 than falling back to 3, at least lately. But you can't forget that the Heroes were pretty bad for a lot of July. So I think all these 3 teams have capability to go on some pretty bad runs. I don't think, even though the Dinos were very hot to begin the year, they haven't really extended their lead. It's been at least 4 games for quite a long time. I don't know when exactly they got out to 4, but it was a long time ago. So I don't really necessarily see any of these 3 pulling away from the pack. I think they're going to be fighting pretty much to the end, unless, it would take something like an injury crisis to one of the 3 to have them fall off.
Yeah, the Bears, they still have Alcantara, like you said. When he pitches, he's right there with Jokic. So maybe that pitching isn't such a big question mark because that offense is solid, and they have at least one ace level starter, like you said, going to the championship game. All those years in a row is pretty impressive. So moving into the next tier, you said there's a pretty big gap between the top three and then the next three here. KT Wiz, LG Twins, and the Kia Tigers. I picked on the ESPN broadcast that it would be the Kia Tigers against the NC Dinos here. Barry mentioning that there. Sam P is a KBO rockstar. Thank you, Barry. And Eric, of course, is the man. So, Eric, let me get your thoughts here. Tigers all the way down at 6 at number 4. What's happening here with Drew Gagnon and Preston Tucker's Kia Tigers?
Yeah, Gagnon wasn't great in his last start. Preston Tucker still not quite back to his hottest form. It's a pretty small gap from 4 to 6. It had been a tier from 4 to 7 for quite a while. The Lions have fallen off, as we'll get to later. Not a whole lot separating these three teams. The Wiz have been easily the hottest lately of these three, and the Tigers have been the coldest, so they're 6 now. But I wouldn't be surprised by any means if they were back up to 4 sometime soon, though if you look at their upcoming series, they've got Twins, then Dinos, then Twins coming up. So it's really a key stretch for them, especially those 2 series against the Twins, who they're in a tight battle for the final couple playoff spots. The Twins have been playing better lately. They're 9-3 over the last 12, but most of that is just that they get to play the Wyverns and Eagles a whole lot over that stretch. They're 2-2 against teams that aren't the Wyverns and Eagles. So I think jury's still out on whether the Twins are fully back. I think this series between these two is going to be, or these couple series between these two is going to be pretty key to determining whether or not one of them really has a chance of breaking into that top 3 and making it a top 4. The Twins, of course, were that team early. And the Tigers, they have the pitching staff to be that team. So I don't hate your pick there. It's definitely, if you're trying to be interesting and not pick 2 of the top 3 teams, I think Tigers are as good a shout as the other 2 teams in this middle tier. And again, really, it's that pitching staff, especially if Hyunjung Yang gets good again like he's supposed to be. With him, Brooks, Gagnon, and Ki Young Im has been a solid mid-rotation starter or better at times this year. I think you look for a team with that kind of starting pitching in a playoff series. So if they can get there, they do have I think they can play above their talent level. Just given that they can, drop off their 5th starter and they probably have the best number 4 starter. Again, assuming Hyunjung Yang is back to his previous form, which he isn't necessarily yet. But if they get those guys going, I would put them not far off a coin flip with any team. But I don't even know for sure that they're going to make the playoffs given how mediocre or worse their lineup is. So they'll have to do that first.
Yes, I made the Kia Tigers pick trying to be, a little out there, trying to have a hot take that you got to be when you're on ESPN there. The left-handed pitching struggles, that is something that you do worry about. And for me, I worry more about Preston Tucker, about that offense. I need to see someone, stand up in that lineup and provide some run support, because right now a team that, is pushing the number 3 spot just last week, ranking 8th in runs per game, is just definitely concerning. I like that pitching staff, so hopefully Gagnon will bounce back. Did have that bad start, but Tigers definitely still in the mix. But who's even more in the mix, and who I didn't actually want to say just because they were playing, is the KT Wiz, going all the way back up to your number 4 here. Mel Rojas Jr., of course, the crazy OPS numbers the past 10 weeks. I don't even know. He's been doing it for so long. Here, Vegas, here asking about that game on Saturday. That ESPN game was between the Wiz and the Wyverns. Wiz dominating in that game because of that offense. Do we still see them be with that 100% offensively driven team as a number 4 threat in the power rankings here, moving them up from number 5?
It's definitely the highest I've had them, but if you look at what they've done over their last 35, 24 and 11, I didn't double check, but that's got to be, if not the best, one of the best couple teams over that stretch. Because again, the Dinos, Bears, and Heroes have all had some cold stretches during that time. So they're playing like one of the best teams in the league right now. And they're beating some good teams while they're doing it too. That lineup can hang with absolutely anybody. And when they have Odrisamer Despaigne or William Cuevas on the mound, they've got a chance. Neither of those guys has really been what you want from a foreign pitcher. They've both been adequate. They don't have a star at the top of the lineup, and they don't really have a back of the rotation that I trust either. Sorry, don't have a star at the top of the rotation. But that lineup, it's deep. Part of the reason they're so much better now is early in the year, Jae-Gyun Hwang, that former San Francisco Giant, was quite poor early in the year, but he's been, I think, at 1,000 OPS for quite some time. Baekho Gong missed a few weeks earlier, too. So when you've got those two guys on either side of Mil Rojas, that's one of the best runs of three hitters in the league. And I think 1 through 6 at least is made up of at least pretty good hitters. So they've got the depth in the lineup, and they've got the absolute star leading it, Mil Rojas. Nobody's come close to him at the moment. So I mean, it really comes down to, do you prefer the offense-heavy team or the pitching-heavy team when it comes down to a playoff race? I could really see arguments for going either way, but the Wiz have the top spot in this middle tier, mostly based on recent performance for now.
Yeah, the Wiz dominating right now. Cuevas and Despani here, Barry mentioning them, and that back-end bullpen. Do you think you've seen enough from them now to actually be confident with them securing that number 4 spot, or do you think there's still some volatility there heading into this final summer month and into the fall?
I think there's plenty of volatility. I think I can see these 3 teams in this middle tier going any direction over the next couple of weeks. So it's more about the recent trends for the Wiz that has them at the top. But if I had to pick somebody today to win one game out of those 3, it would be the Wiz. But it's very close.
So close 4 through 6. Here's Sean signing in. Thank you, Sean, for popping on in. Talking some KBO action as we move down the power rankings. Number 7, the Lotte Giants. Number 8, Samsung Lions. And the number 9 spot, the SK Wyverns. The Lions, they looked like that dark horse Wiz level team not that long ago, but now sitting at number 8 behind the Giants, who can't seem to really do anything besides just, Dan Straley. That's it. That seems to be all the Giants are good for, but yet they're still at number 7 and sit at 500 on the year. What do we think about this bottom end tier? Is there any hope for the Giants and the Lions?
There is. I mean, we're still only about at the halfway point, but I think they need to show more than they have so far. Not enough top-end talent on either team. Even when I did have the Lions as high as 4th, I think it was just 2 weeks ago, I wasn't super confident in their talent. I didn't have a ton of faith that they would stick there. They were just the best performing out of a big middle tier of teams. And now that they're down a foreign hitter, since they let go of Tyler Saladino with his injuries, and they're still waiting for Daniel Palka to arrive, it's hard to see them making a run anytime soon. The Giants, they are making something of a run. They've got on a pretty good stretch recently. I think it's winning 5 out of 7, and not just against bad teams either. They've got fight in them. I wouldn't rule them out completely. I don't necessarily see where that run's going to come from. But again, that's a good teams they played over their last 3 series. Heroes, Dinos, and Tigers, and they've gone 5-2 against them. So they have the ability to hang with anybody, certainly when Dan Straley's on the mound. They don't have any other starter who's even started 2 games that has an ERA below 5. So that's not really what you want. I think it's a good bullpen is what keeps that overall ERA respectable. Good bullpen, and of course Dan Straley. I don't think there's enough there to seriously challenge that middle tier, but they're kind of doing it right now anyway, so I have to give some respect to them.
Yeah, you look at the actual standings here, number 7, and right there, just 2 games back of the Wiz, and within striking distance, they sweep a series. You're right there in the Tigers Twins range, so they definitely haven't put themselves in a big hole right now. Looking at their upcoming schedule, Wyverns, okay, they could get that sweep here, but outside of that is going to be a challenging stretch. Do you think this is where, after the Wyvern series, where we could see the Giants really fall off and really be tested to see if they can stick around?
I mean, yeah, definitely based on their talent, I wouldn't expect them to go more than about 3-6 against the Bears, Dinos, and Heroes combined. But again, I wouldn't have expected them to do much more than that. in their previous series. So they have some fight, but yeah, sooner or later, it seems like that big losing streak is coming.
And speaking of, going from very hot to very not, the Lions as well, Tyler Saladino. Offensively, is there anyone that we look to kind of fill that void, or are they still trying to figure it out for themselves?
Jayhawk Lee is a good hitter. He's got a OPS comfortably above 900. Not a ton of power, but very high contact with respectable power and some speed. But he needs to be a team's second or third best hitter, not their best hitter, I think. So they've got something there, and especially for fantasy purposes, whenever they play at home, most hitter-friendly park in the league. If their guys are cheap enough, I don't hate throwing a couple of them in there, but I don't think there's enough to make a run.
Yeah, Lions not looking good just 2 weeks ago. Looked solid. Now they're not. The Wyverns, Eagles, they've looked bad all year. Eagles, I got a note there at number 10. They moved up a spot to 2-1. I mean, are they now, in the conversation?
I mean, you can't rule them out of eventually rising all the way up to number 9. The Wyverns have gotten outscored by over 10 runs per game over the last week, which is not what you want. Or maybe it was last 5 games. I don't know if that's exactly the last week or what, but not what you want there. And yeah, the Eagles, it's their second week all year, I believe, where they went 500. So congrats to them. We'll wait to see if they can win 4 games in a week sometime. Honestly, I'm not sure I'd bet on it. I don't think you can get odds on that, but they haven't shown the ability to do it so far. So not a whole lot to say about either team. Not
a lot. And I got to say, for those keeping score at home, the Eagles have yet to reach 20 wins. I mean, that's something I've been keeping track of, and that is pretty sad. 54 losses. If you consider that tie a win, half a loss, they're still not at 20. 19.5, 54.5. Not looking good for the Eagles. And I say that, and now we look at the series here. I actually want to start with this Eagles Dino series. And I say, maybe that's going to continue. But then, yet again, you have to think, okay, Brandon Bardson's on their team. If there's any chance they are going to continue their 500 ways, it would be with one of their foreign pitchers on the bump and Chad Bell. That's what we have tonight. But then I see that ERA, and I think, oh no, is this going to be another Dino sweep here? How do we feel about the first series here, Dinos Eagles?
Yeah, it's maybe as close as it's going to get. This one, Chad Bell is coming off his best start of the year, you probably have to say. It wasn't good. He allowed 2 runs in 5 innings. That's fine. He only struck out 2. And how much credit do we give a guy for a decent start against the Wyverns? Not a ton. But hey, at least it's something in his first start back from his latest trip to the injured list. But man, it's been a struggle for him all year. Done pretty much everything's gone wrong. Battling elbow injuries to start the season, opened the year on the injured list, never really looked healthy since he returned. Low strikeouts, high walks, high homers, pretty much bad in every way. That ERA is pretty close to deserved. And even last year, he wasn't elite by any means. Pretty mediocre underlying numbers, a decent ERA, 3.5 to 4, somewhere in that range. But he's not a shutdown arm even when healthy. And, maybe he's healthy now. The one start was decent again, but odds are he's probably not. And even when he is, I wouldn't expect him to shut down the Dinos. So I would expect a lot of runs from the league leaders in this one.
Yes, the Dinos, of course, atop the standings. But they are at their most vulnerable right now, and the Eagles look to be at their strongest right now. So that's why I say maybe there's a chance. I know Chad Bell isn't the traditional stud foreign pitcher. It's because Dressier's asking about, the Dinos falling apart late. If we see the Dinos drop 1 game, would you consider them, still back on track? I mean, what is the threshold here? What do the Dinos have to do to prove they're kind of moving past their kind of last week's slump? What do you want to see from this team to prove that?
But yeah, I mean, a sweep would certainly be nice, and they've got the talent to do it. Would never freak out too much about 1 loss against any given team. Obviously, if they are losing a series to the Eagles, then you really got to worry because nobody does that except for sometimes the Bears. But Their odds of falling apart late in the year. One thing, it seems like they've been healthier than most of the other top teams, at least early in the year when they were way better than everyone and best at pretty much every stat. They really were not losing guys to injury at all. They've had both their foreign pitchers make every single start. Cheng Mo-ku had made every single start. He's getting a brief rest now, but he's not hurt as far as I know. They should be back soon. And their star hitters were mostly healthy, but lately they're starting to get a little bit more banged up. Sungbum Na has had a couple brief trips to the injured list. Yu Ji-yang has had a couple brief trips. Aaron Altair seems to be getting one now. It's possible that some of that's just maintenance, given that they played so much and that they have a comfortable lead. But I think, if they were to lose Yang or Na or Altair for an extended period, that would be the kind of thing that could trigger them falling apart. Because there's some fragility there, again, with the bullpen in the back of the rotation. So if they stop getting a lot of injury luck, you might start to worry there. For the game tonight, Jayhawk Lee was a guy I recommended on today's cheat sheet, but mostly because I think, as we'll see as we go through these games, there's not a lot of trustworthy pitching tonight at all. Jayhawk Lee is not one of those trustworthy pitchers, but he's placing the Eagles. I would never hate to start a guy against the Eagles for daily fantasy. The Lee has not been good. Allowed 5 runs and just got 7 outs. 0 strikeouts, 4 walks his last time out. Over the season as a whole, it's maybe not quite as bad as his ERA that's over 6, but low strikeouts, high walks, high homers, it's not good. He was supposed to be maybe a capable number 4. He had a decent ERA last year. I think he kept it just under 4, but not exciting peripherals. So he only has the upside as a respectable back of the rotation guy, and he hasn't even been that. So if you're starting him tonight for daily fantasy, it's almost purely because it's against the Eagles.
Yeah, I know. You're a big strikeout guy, and no strikeouts in that last start against the Lotte Giants is concerning. But there's a little room for hope. Of course, you got the 7 Ks against that powerful KT Wiz offense. So definitely banking more on the matchup more than the pitcher himself. Looking at that total then, 2 pitchers with a high ERA and the Dinos, I'm thinking the over. Correct?
Yeah, pretty comfortably over. You might worry about the Eagles' ability to score enough runs to help that over, but the Dinos could get most that way themselves. And I don't trust Lee to keep the score down well. So pretty comfortable over, pretty comfortable Dinos. You'd like to see somebody other than Jayhawk Lee in there to make it the easiest pick of the day, but this is still Dinos versus Eagles. So I don't think we need to overthink it too much.
That's fair. Maybe reading a little too much into the Eagles' recent success and the Dinos' recent failures. But we'll see. And no Aaron Altair tonight. First time in a while. So we'll have to see how the Dinos manage without him. Moving over, another pretty good starter, Despaigne taking on the Heroes. This is probably one of the more interesting series of the first half of the week here, fighting for that number 3, number 4. I know you had them at number 2, the Heroes, that is, in power rankings, but this is very much 2 playoff teams fighting it out for seeding. Am I correct?
Well, two contending teams. The Wiz don't actually have that playoff spot yet, even though I think they have a shot at it. This one of the better series for sure. Definitely the Twins Tigers is a good one too. But these are 2 hot teams, 2 entertaining teams with some good offenses lately. So I'm excited to see how this one plays out. Odrisamer Despaigne does give the Wiz a shot. He's probably been their best pitcher over the course of the year. Not sure if it's him or Cuevas. They've both had strong and weak stretches at various times. Despaigne has been quite streaky, quite good early, then quite bad for the middle. And then I think you have to say he's on a hot streak right now. 5 out of his last 6 starts are quality starts, but he has an 8 earned run in there once. He's capable of getting blown up anytime. He's got a little bit of David Buchanan in him, I guess, but he's got that 8 and that 10 in there. But he's been a pretty good pitcher over the course of the season. Slightly better than average strikeouts, better than average walks and homers too. He does everything fairly well. He's got a real tough task against the Heroes with the way they've been hitting, sorry. But he was still one of my top recommendations on today's cheat sheet, as much because there's not a ton of other options as anything, but I think he's worth the risk given that he does have plenty of upside, like what he did last time out, 8 strikeouts and only 1 earned run in 7 innings. He's certainly capable of that type of performance.
Now, looking at the team's offense here, Barry asking about the stack. Talking about this in the cheat sheet, you can, of course, find at rotowire.com. I always think the Wiz, pretty great lineup there. You talked about this earlier. As a stackable team, Mel Rojas Jr. and Becco Gong right there in the middle of it. How do we feel about them going up against Lee tonight?
Yes, they were one of my stack recommendations. I threw out Jae-Gyun Hwang in the number 2 spot, Mel Rojas in the number 3. I skipped Becco Gong as the cleanup just because it's lefty on left. I jumped all the way down to the 6th spot for Jung-Dae Bae, but most of their top several hitters have been playable for most of the season. And Sung-Ho Lee has been quite bad lately. He was terrible in May, 7.83 ERA in May. Great in June out of nowhere, 1.86 ERA in June. And then in 3 starts in July, it's a 16.20 ERA, which is about 4 times what you're looking for. 3 really awful starts. And then he got a bit of a break, I think probably just to clear his head or something. We'll see if that worked. Pretty tough assignment to come back to against Mel Rojas and the Wiz. Haven't really been convinced by Lee this year. Not terrible, but doesn't strike out a ton of guys. Avoids walks at an okay clip, but not elite by any means. He's a young guy who hasn't really shown a ton so far in his career. So I think pretty comfortable to load up on the Wiz in this one.
Yes, those 2 6 spots are definitely concerning. All on the road, though, so maybe he finds a little comfort for this home matchup, but definitely not too promising. I'll put it that way. Mel Rojas Jr., they're looking strong. And I'm going to think another over here. How do we feel about that 10-run total?
Yeah, I think the Wiz should get most of the way to that over on their own. Again, I recommended Despaigne, but that was as much about lack of alternatives as anything. I think he's got a pretty good shot to shut the Heroes down. But with the way they've been hitting lately since they got Addison Russell, I mean, he's been everything the Heroes could have hoped for. I was maybe preaching a bit of caution, just saying, hey, we don't know how good a guy is going to be right away, adjusting to a new league, a new country in the middle of a pandemic. Basically, literally nobody's done that before except for, I guess, Brandon Barnes 1 week before. We don't really know what it looks like to do that, but certainly it doesn't seem like he has any problems. And again, he was a competent hitter at the MLB level, not elite by any means, but basically every hitter, every foreign hitter that goes over to the KBO was not particularly good at MLB. That's why they went over there. And Russell definitely held his own, below average, but playable. He was an everyday starter for several years. So he's been everything they wanted, and it's been a huge boon to the middle of their lineup. It's a very deep unit. You could probably say it even goes 7 deep at this point. Guys like Byung-Ho Park hitting 6. Not many teams could afford to do that except for, I guess, the Bears and the Dinos. So I think they're up there with one of the best lineups now that they finally have a foreign hitter, given that they weren't far off without him. So it's a tough assignment for Despaigne. He's enough better than Sung-Ho Lee that I'm going to side with the Wiz in this one. But again, he has blow-up potential, and the Heroes certainly have the ability to put up a big number against him. So I'm going to lean Wiz because of the big gap in the pitchers, and definitely lean over. And if anybody wants to side with that hot Heroes offense and think that Despaigne is going to have one of his occasional bad starts, I wouldn't argue too hard against you on that one.
Yeah, you can't mention, just going back to what you're saying, you can't mention this Heroes team without mentioning Addison Russell, like we were saying. It's been great, and I definitely wouldn't put it past him to maybe have some struggles. Like you said, this is something that we've never seen before, a guy just to a league during these, I mean, the fans are coming back now, but in these, 10% capacity ballparks, it's just not the same, something that, he's not used to. So he's had great success now. We'll see. I don't think Despaigne, like you said, will be able to get him off his groove, but definitely would want to put that little word of caution, just that it still definitely could happen. So moving on now, we have the Lions and Bears. This one looks like one of the slower series. Nothing too great, especially when you look at that ERA hitting 22.5. It almost looks like a typo there. I'm thinking all Bears here easily, especially what the Bears did last week and what the Lions have not been doing. Is there any room for optimism for the Lions in this series?
Yeah, we've got a nice NFC North matchup here. That ERA of 22 is because he's only gotten 5 outs all year. He's only made 3 appearances. Hard to come one that high with a normal level of outings for sure. Hard to even tell if he's going to be a true starter, Sung-Jin Lee. He hasn't been a starter in any of his 3 KBO games, but he has started some in the Futures League. But he hasn't been particularly good down there. 3.55 ERA in 33 innings, that's fine. But 24 strikeouts to 18 walks, nothing special there at all. It is the Lions, but the Lions, they're not terrible. They've got a few hitters at the top of the order. So I did recommend Jayhawk Lee tonight. I think I wouldn't necessarily trust Sung-Jin Lee at all. And if this does turn out to be just a bullpen game, I wouldn't trust the Bears relievers. So there's something there for the Lions tonight. But I think that gap in lineup is quite big. Tie-in one, Lions starter, has a decent ERA, but it's not really backed up very well. Low strikeout rate and merely average at issuing walks and avoiding homers. And again, as you see there, coming off a bad start against the Eagles, you never want to see that. He had a pretty low ERA for much of the year, but again, it seemed to be mostly a fluke. Or if not a fluke, as Sean mentioned there, strong defense. The Lions have outperformed their peripherals throughout the year. Most of their starters have. And that's generally due to strong defense. Jayhawk Lee, I believe, is considered one of the better defensive shortstops in the league. So there's something there. Maybe tie-in one, we should expect him to have an ERA a little bit closer to his actual ERA going forward. I don't have a ton of faith in him, especially against a lineup as good as the Bears, and especially as a righty against a core of that Bears lineup that's very left-handed. Although Kyung-Min Hur, their 6th hitter who hits righty, could well be their hottest hitter right now. His hitting streak has got to be at like 25-ish for now. Not sure on the exact number, but it's been like a month since he last went hitless. I don't think he has a homer in that stretch, but yeah, he's looking like Jose Fernandez. I think he just now qualifies for the plate appearance minimum to be technically a qualified hitter. He missed some time with an injury earlier in the year. And he's actually 1 point ahead of Mel Rojas Jr. in the batting average title. Again, I think he just qualified within the last couple days because he had missed time. But he's got as good a shot at anybody of keeping Rojas from that Triple Crown. So given the depth of that Bears lineup, I think they could give tie-in one some troubles. It's really just a question of, are they going to get anything from Sung-Jin Lee on the offensive side, or on the pitching side? And I think I got to side Bears just because that lineup is so good, and Juan, I think, is pretty mediocre. But there's definitely a path to the Lions win.
I like that. I think, in case you're just tuning in, KBO Chats Live, finding some sleeper pick here, a guy that, you wouldn't normally think about the Bears batting so low being such a star. But we look at these numbers here. I mean, that is, and you dropped the Jose Miguel Fernandez reference. You never do that with the guy. You don't throw that title around lightly, considering what he did at the beginning of this year. And I did see that. I think Hur is just above Rojas for that batting average title as of right now. I know the KBO official Twitter page posted a little graphic, and I was like, why is Mel Rojas Jr.? Why is his face not the biggest one on there? It's because of this insane hit streak right now. You even see a 3-hit game not that long ago against the Dinos, too. He kept that thing hot. Should be consistent tonight. You talk about the Lions. If the defense is the best thing about the team, maybe you're not in a great position, but I definitely do trust the pitcher a little bit more, like you're saying, when you look at the ERA. And it being a bullpen game, you definitely don't want to side with the Bears in that situation. Checking in on some guys tuning in. Josh, Great to see the show, of course. DX coming in. I'm sorry, guys, with the timing. I know we've been like, the Wiz bullpen, just crazy everywhere. You don't know what you're going to get night to night, but stay with us here as we are in hot like the Wiz. So you like the Bears and you like the over on this series. Best DFS pick, is it going to be her at that low spot in the lineup, or are you still going to go with maybe a Jaello or a Jose Miguel Fernandez?
Yeah, I think any of those top 6 guys are acceptable plays most of the time. 2 through 5 will all have the platoon advantage. But Kyungmin Her, especially third base, is not particularly deep. It's a little bit deeper now that Her is there, and now that Jae Gun Hwang is playing a lot better. But he's playable pretty much every night.
All right, moving on. Giants Wyvern, just a quick one here before we get to probably the best series of the night in the Twins Tigers matchup. But Giants Wyverns, 2 teams at the bottoms. I see this basically as a must win for the Giants. Being 38 and 35 going into Thursday, I would think would be something they almost need to do, as we are now officially into August. And standing in their way of that is Ricardo Pinto, a foreign pitcher, but maybe more on the lines of a Chad Bell type than a Drew Rosinski. How do we feel with this Giants-Wyverns matchup?
Yeah, I've been thoroughly unimpressed with Pinto for most of the year. He's been real bad over his last 3. ERA of 9, whip over 2, 5 strikeouts, 9 walks over those last 3. One of which was against these Giants, which I guess was his best of the bunch, but hardly a good one. Over the course of the entire season, he has exactly as many walks as strikeouts. That's not what you want to see at all. He's suppressed homers decently well, but hasn't necessarily lately. And it just doesn't seem to be a lot there. I guess you say he's a right-hander going up against the very right-handed Giants. But I would not give him, at this point, I think it's been long enough in the year. I've talked in the past about you got to give these foreign players respect until they prove otherwise, because, again, you got to assume that the KBO scouts are pretty good. I think you got to respect those guys and say if they're bringing somebody in, they only have 3 foreign player spots, so he better be good enough. And most of the time he is, as we see overall. So I like to give the foreign players benefit of the doubt early on, especially given what we know about baseball stats. They take a while to stabilize. It's not like we're that far into the season, but we are a pretty meaningful amount of starts. And when he's been so mediocre, I don't think there's reason to give him all that much respect at this point. Again, even when he was preventing runs, I was not a fan of his. It looked like a mirage, given that he couldn't strike people out and walked everybody. So not a lot of faith in him in this one. Giants have been hitting fairly well lately. Even though they're heavily right-handed, I think this is a pretty easy matchup for him. We might be spared the game entirely by rain. Thankfully, of all the games that are looking like they might get rained out, it's this one. But it's not a great one, because So is not that great on the other side either.
Yes, Barry agreeing here, saying stay far away from this game, and hopefully the rain, 52% chance, will help out with that one. You give the slight edge to the Giants. I know the Wyverns had some recent success. If this game does indeed happen, do you look for the Giants, or do you? I know you just said this, but do you maybe give Pinto another start here against a weak Giants offense?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a game for him to have a decent matchup, it's either these Giants or the Eagles. So maybe. Yeah, the Wyverns have been awful lately, getting outscored by 10 runs or more on average over the last 5 games. And the Giants have been on a decent run. But Jim Seo has been quite bad lately, too. 3 straight starts where he's gone 4 innings or fewer, a total of 10 innings over those 3 starts. Got an ERA of 12.60 and a whip of 2.5 over those last 3. Again, not at all what you want. And he hasn't been good over the course of the year either. It's 4th worst strikeout rate among qualified starters, just 11.8%. He avoids walks at a decent clip, but, he just throws it up there and lets them hit it, and generally they do. That's why his ERA is over 5. His ERA was mid-5s last year, too. Not a whole lot there with him either. I guess his peripherals are a tiny bit better than Pinto's, given that he's avoiding the walks, though he is allowing homers, which Pinto is generally suppressed over the course of the year. So yeah, you got basically two weak lineups, two pitchers who've been pretty bad all year and terrible lately. So it's a bit of a mess. The only good thing you could really say about either team is that the Giants have been hot lately, so that gives them the edge for me, but not particularly comfortably. If the game does go forward, if you're able to set your lineups at the last minute, I would like most of the hitters because I really don't trust these pitchers. The Wyverns' offense is in theory better now that they have Dungmin Han back. He's been back for the last couple of weeks. He's a mediocre average guy in general, but hits for a ton of power. Only 10 homers, but that's because he's missed a lot of the year. Fouled the ball off his shin and missed, I think, well over a month, was it? Last I checked, which was late last week, so it may not be true anymore now that he's gone 3 games without a homer, but his home run rate in terms of homers per plate appearance was a hair better than Mel Rojas's, just to give you an idea of how much pop he has. He had a 40-homer season, maybe 42 or so in 2018. So he's got a lot of power. He's a lefty going up against a shaky righty. He'd be somebody I'd be interested in. Yeah, 10 homers, 123 plate appearances. That's pretty easy enough math there. A homer every 12.3 plate appearances. That's elite kind of rate. So it's in theory a better lineup for the Wyverns now that he's back, but it hasn't translated to wins lately. So there's a path to picking them because So's been even worse than Pinto lately. There's a path to picking the Giants because overall they've been better than the Wyverns. And there's probably a broader path of not thinking very much about this game.
I would definitely agree. A lot of hot mess here. Maybe John Choi, Jimmy Romack in the heart of that Wyverns lineup can do something, but most likely probably not, as they haven't crossed that 25-win mark on the year. Last game here, run up on time, but save the best for last. LG Twins against the Kia Tigers, a matchup for a playoff spot. Potentially both teams in that mix to dethrone the Bears at number 3, do I dare say, / the Heroes. I know that's a dynamic spot, the number 3 spot right now, but Twins, Tigers, Tyler Wilson starting, I think. Does that give the Twins the edge here with that starting pitcher ERA?
Yeah, I think it does. I think he is one of the best pitchers on the night. As you may have noticed, I haven't said very many good things about very many of them. He was one of my recommendations on the cheat sheet today, even though I've been generally unimpressed with what he's done. But just to give an idea of how early we still are in the season, his ERA is 4.20, 4.22, but it would only be 3.62 if you toss out his first start of the year. That's a 60-point gap. If you remember, he was coming off that quarantine and facing the Dinos and just got lit up, 7 runs. We're still early enough in the year that one bad start can affect your ERA by over half a run. So, that is on his resume for a reason. He was bad, but you can blame the just coming off quarantine for that. If you were to throw that out, he's a mid-3s ERA pitcher, which is a lot better than a low 4s. It's worse than he was his first 2 seasons when he was right around 3, even below 3. And the overall pretty mediocre peripherals, more or less average strikeout and walks. And even when he was good in his first couple of years, he wasn't elite strikeout to walk guy. He was fine. But fine should be enough against the Tigers. 8th in scoring this season. He is a righty. People have talked about the Tigers' struggles against lefties, which I think is mostly because their 2 best hitters by far, Preston Tucker and Hyungwoo Choi, are left-handed. Their top 2 guys are righties who are decent. Chang-Chin Lee and Sun Bin Kim are good contact guys. And Ji-Wan Na's not a nobody. But there's not a ton of depth in that lineup. Wilson isn't good enough that I'd completely stay away from Tucker and Choi for fantasy purposes. But again, he's one of the better starters on the night, so it's a decent chance you're including him yourself.
Yeah, I'm gotta say I'm a little shocked with your analysis on this game. Just saying such good things about Tyler Wilson and Preston Tucker, 2 guys that all year we have not been high on. Preston Tucker for stretches there, but I did not realize that Tyler Wilson ERA stat. That's a pretty interesting one there. So maybe he is, coming into his own and, moving past that, a little hiccup in there in the beginning of the season. You don't blame him. It's a crazy year. And, past couple starts, he's been keeping it 3 or under, which is definitely respectable. And we looked at this in the beginning, the Kia Tigers offense, especially when Preston Tucker is cold like he is now, is one of the worst, 8th in runs per game, 6th in batting average. So definitely below average if you're looking at them without that strong bat in the middle. The total here, do we have enough confidence in Lee to keep it down? Because I would imagine Wilson is going to be giving up 2, 3, 4 at most.
Yeah, Wilson seems like a pretty strong bet for 2 or 3 runs in 6 innings, pretty much every start lately. I don't know if he's going to completely shut down the Tigers, but I see no reason why he shouldn't do that. Minwoo Lee has been a back-end starter. His ERA is over 5, and he looks like it should be. He's allowed 4 earned runs in each of his last 3 starts, only striking out a total of 6 batters across those 3. Low 14.2% strikeout rate on the season. He looks like a back-end starter. That's pretty much he's not going to absolutely get killed generally. He'll keep you in games if you have a good offense, which the Tigers don't. Not a lot of faith in him at all. Twins have been hitting better. But again, you got to have that caveat that most of their recent games are against the Wyverns and Eagles. But they have blown them up in some of them. What is it, a 24 spot in there against the Wyverns, followed by an 11 and a 9 and another 9 later in the week. Again, you gotta adjust for the quality of opponent there, but it's even with that adjustment, the Twins still come out of their recent stretch looking pretty impressive. I think they should keep that up against Minwoo Lee. Hyun-Soo Kim has been really hot for the Twins lately, suddenly showing power. He's been a very high contact, medium power guy for basically the entirety of his career. But he's suddenly a power guy over the last month or so. Roberto Ramos is not nearly back to what he was, but he's above average hitter again at least, which is saying something given that he had a pretty deep slump. Yun-Sung Che was decent early in the year. Then he got injured. Then he came back and had like a 300 OPS for 3 weeks. So they sent him down, their number 3 hitter. And he's come back up and it's been awesome in his last couple games. He had 8 RBIs in his first game back. Yeah, that was that 24-run game they had. So they've got guys getting healthy. They've got guys getting hot. Again, it's against some terrible teams, but even if you say he gets twice as many runs as against the Wyverns as anybody else, that would still be a 4 RBI game against anyone else. Obviously can't directly make that translation, but I think that kind of performance would play against anybody. So I think I'd be pretty confident in the Twins lineup against a pretty mediocre pitcher in Minwoo Lee.
Yeah, you got to adjust for the competition. The Twins were not facing, elite level talent. They're facing the 2 worst teams that you possibly could. And yet, I still kind of believe in this offense now. Looking at what they did, 24 runs, that is impressive to say the least. And when you look at that hit streak and you look at the run production, okay, maybe that one off day, that's fine. We'll give them that. But 9 or more runs, I think it's going to be an important one for the Twins here in the standings, sitting at 4th right now. If they can distance themselves from the Tigers, it's going to be an interesting one. Eagles, of course, keeping that in relative standings that they were not very high on our power rankings. Twins at number 5. Total here, do we still like the Twins to reach, their 9+ win plateau? Or do you think, they'll come back to earth now that they're playing a real team?
They are playing a real team, but again, Minwoo Lee is the worst starter on that team, with the possible exception of Hyun Jung Yang, depending on how he's feeling lately. Lee is, again, he's been a 5th starter for most of his career. He's never looked particularly good at any point. So I think I'd go with the over. Mostly faith in the hot Twins offense against a struggling pitcher, and then a little bit of a chance that Tyler Wilson is only mediocre and could get knocked around by the likes of Tucker and Choi. So I think I'd go Twins and over in this one.
We like the Twins and the over, and that's all 5 series tonight. I love the KBO, very consistent. When it's not raining, at least, that you get those 5 games, 6 of the 7 days a week. Just out of time here, but top 3 picks here, courtesy of FanDuel Sportsbook. What are we feeling here, Eric? The top 3, the best 3 picks on the day.
Well, we can start with team against the Eagles. Just so happens to be the Dinos this time, which makes it pretty easy. I think number 2 is probably actually that Twins game. It's a pretty big gap between Wilson and Lee. Not a huge gap between those teams overall, but the recent form and the gap in pitchers seems pretty significant there. And then third pick might be the Lions-Bears over, I believe. I don't feel hugely confident in the winner for the other 3, and I do feel pretty strongly that Lions-Bears game is going to produce a lot of runs because, again, Taiyan Wan has an ERA in the mid-3s, but has pitched like a guy who has an ERA close to 5. Maybe we get some good defense keeping that down, but the Bears lineup is too good, I think, to really be kept down. And with what looks like either a bullpen game or a very unreliable starter getting called up from the minors, maybe they'll give him a handful of innings. But I think I'd be pretty comfortably on the over between those 2, even with the game happening at the most pitcher-friendly park in the league, Jim Till Baseball Stadium.
I'd have to agree. Bullpen game most likely going to happen tonight. And the Bears offense, they can get cold. Of course, we saw that a little bit last week, but they've been hot. And against the best team, the Dinos, I would expect them to easily go for that 7 or more now against the Samsung Lions weak pitching staff. So those are our top 3. Bears, Lions over. Dinos, of course, easy one there over the Eagles. And the Twins over the Tigers in the best series. Probably the best. I still like that Wiz Kiwoom series, but that's what we're looking at right now. Barry also liking that KT Wiz Kiwoom Hero series and the over specifically. Despaigne on the bump with that 4.20 ERA. So maybe not as confident a pick. And I think that's just about it. We talked about the injury news, Aaron Altair. Anything to say about Sampson for that Giants team? Is that anywhere near, being relevant?
I mean, he hasn't been good, but again, he missed some time. So, like I said earlier, you got to give foreign players the benefit of the doubt for a bit. And given that he's missed some time, I'm not sure we've quite eclipsed that number for saying he's definitely not good enough. So there's definitely a world in which he comes back and is perfectly adequate. He doesn't have to be all that good to be the Giants' second best pitcher because, again, Dan Straley's their only starter with an ERA under 5. So there's a chance. My default expectation wouldn't be that he'd be all that good because he hasn't shown really anything yet. But it hasn't been a ton of starts. So there's a world in which he comes back and they make a charge towards the 5 spot. But again, not the default expectation there.
And they definitely need him if they are going to make that charge. Their pitching staff just 5th in runs per game. Just here saying go Dinos. Dinos going to, again, be without Aaron Altair tonight, the former Philly. Former SF Giant for just 1 at bat there, 1 strikeout. But something to note as he is a part of that Dinos offensive machine. To be notable there. And that's pretty much it. All right. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Back on Thursday, we will let you know the time. Of course, like that Wiz bullpen, all over the board. But we got that great content. The Betco Gong and the Mel Rojas Jr. of KBO live streaming. We got you.
I'll take that. Thanks for coming, everybody.